Welcome back to a brand new edition of Views from the Booth. I'm your host, Reed Becker, and joining me today, he is the public address announcer of the New England Patriots at Gillette Stadium, as well as he has his own platform with the Patriots Playbook and the Providence Friars basketball play-by-play radio announcer. His name is John Rooke. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Reed, it's always good to be with you, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. How's your summer?
So far, so good. It's been busy. We just finished up 2 weeks of sports broadcasting camp here at Dean for a bunch of aspiring, new sports broadcasters, of which you were one at one time. And I think hopefully we will have some new, young, fresh, vibrant voices in the mix in the very near future.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. It looked a lot of fun and good to see some normalcy back.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. It did feel normal again, even though we did take all the precautions that we needed to take. To make sure everybody stayed safe. It did feel good to have some normalcy back. And I think that was a huge benefit to everyone.
For sure. So I want to start, speaking of broadcasting, because broadcasting during the pandemic has obviously brought a lot of challenges. My first question I just want to start is with you doing the Providence Friars. How has it been doing it, without a crowd, and then on the road games doing it off a monitor? Because I bring this up because obviously this is a different sport with baseball, but here in the New York, New Jersey area, I remember back earlier in the season when Corey Kluber threw a no-hitter for the Yankees,
Yep.
And Michael Kay, the Yankees announcer, was doing it off a monitor, and he was saying that he doesn't think, even if he was in person down in Texas at the game, he won't think he would have been able to get a better call from what he did on the monitor. So I'm just curious from what your experience was, if you agree or how you were able to do it.
Well, I would tell you that there's nothing like being at the game because, when you're live at the game, you can use your peripheral vision as well as your obvious, front view vision. Doing it off a monitor, you're at the mercy of the director who's pushing the buttons to decide what you get to see at home on the television cameras that are there. And, for instance, let's say, as a play-by-play announcer, you're following the ball. You might have, if you're there in person, you might catch in that peripheral vision a guy come down wrong on his ankle or come down wrong on his knee, God forbid, if he has a knee injury, and you would be able to stay with that. Whereas the director, the television, broadcast is going to be following the ball at all times because that's their job to show the ball go in the basket, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that potentially you could miss and can miss, and announcers do miss. I mean, let's face it, baseball announcers are getting hammered left and right, and perhaps rightfully so, because they're not back, for the most part, back at the game site. And I'm of the opinion, if you're vaccinated, you should be at the ballpark. If you're vaccinated, you should be at the venue, the stadium, the arena. You should be there. Now, if you want to take extra precautions beyond vaccination, I think that's fine. Everybody needs to feel somewhat safe. But if you don't feel safe, look, this is the work environment that we've been given, to work in over the next, couple of years until hopefully we finally, get this thing beaten down. And if you're not doing it, somebody needs to do it. There's a lot of money that's being, spent out there by the consuming public. And the consuming public needs to have the trust in their reporters and in their announcers to give them an accurate, somewhat entertaining product for the money that they spend. And that's something that's always been a bench watermark of mine.
So I'm just curious then, like for your instance then with like doing basketball, when it's like 5 less minutes left in the game in a close game, you're doing either in person but no fans or off a monitor. How are you able to, like, I guess, because usually as an announcer, at least from my experience when we did it at Dean this past spring, I mean, it's challenging, but you're getting your like voice off of the vibe of the crowd with like the emotion, would you say? How would you able to handle?
There's no doubt that the vibe of the crowd is big, but I mean, we've all had to learn that there's a certain amount of showmanship in this profession with the absence of crowds that we've had to learn to adapt to. And so you literally don't worry about the crowd. You just have to call it as you would call it, whether there's crowd or not. Sometimes the crowd being there can make it easier for you to make a more emotional or more energetic call, but you really can't let that enter into it. This is where you just put on blinders and you pretend that there are people there. I had to do that at, Gillette Stadium last fall because I broadcast to literally an empty stadium. They were like, 30 or 40 media people in the stands. So those were the only people that were listening. So, but you can't let that bother you. You're expected to do a job. You got a job to do. And you don't worry about who's there and who can't hear you or who can hear you. So is it weird? Yeah. But if you're a professional, it should be easy enough to overcome.
Now, I'm just curious for this upcoming season, I guess for both. Well, first with Providence, do you know, are you going to be able to travel this time, or is it going to be the same as usual from last year?
There isn't anything official yet. I'm hoping that we're back to as close to normal as we can get, because we're vaccinated. So, I don't think, air travel, without masks is ever going to be that way again for the foreseeable future, to be quite honest with you. So I would assume as long as we're able to travel, as long as we're vaccinated and we take all the normal precautions, things should be back to normal. But here's the catch that I'm finding, and this also, probably is a reason right now why you don't see a lot of Major League Baseball or even minor league baseball teams traveling their announcers right now, because there's a cost factor involved. Right. Teams took huge monetary hits during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic a year ago, when they weren't allowed to put fans in the stands, sell tickets, sell concessions, sell all kinds of stuff. So their profit margin isn't anywhere near what they would expect it to be. And who's going to pay for that?
Right.
The announcers. Yeah. They're gonna cut because they're like, well, we can't afford to send you on the road anymore, which is a terrible, crappy thing to do, to be quite honest with you, because you're making guys who had no stake in the game. You're making them the stakeholders here. That's not the issue. You still got a responsibility as a team owner to your fans. And if you're not sending the announcers on the road, if you hold those purse strings and you're sending the announcers on the road, then fans should realize that, hey, you're gypping us. You're shortchanging us. You're not giving us what we want and what we should demand, which is a clear, accurate, entertaining picture from our guys. And so you as an owner and you as someone who holds the purse strings, you're not doing the job you should be doing. And if I was a fan, I'd be screaming bloody murder over that.
I agree. I just have one more question before I get to the Patriots on this. Do you think the only reason obviously the money is the big factor, but do you think that one of the other concerns that they have because usually, if I'm not mistaken, with play-by-play announcers for TV, they usually travel with the team. Yeah. Do you think maybe that they're concerned because teams in baseball, look at the Yankees, have had outbreaks left and right. Do you think maybe they're concerned of contracting it to them? Or because of COVID, how it's getting worse again because of that? Is that a possibility or is it not?
You mean, all right, rephrase that question again, because I think I know what you're saying.
So, in normal world, the announcers would be traveling on the same plane with the team, but because of how bad the pandemic has been, since it's getting worse, and teams are having in baseball specifically outbreaks left and right, do you think they're concerned about putting them getting exposed to that too?
Oh, no question. Yes, sir. No, there's no question about that. Yeah. And again, I think that's making scapegoats out of the announcers for the most part, because look, if the announcers are vaccinated, there shouldn't be any issue. Right. Now, if the announcers are unvaccinated, I certainly understand why a team or broadcast officials would have a problem traveling in, because you're putting everybody who's vaccinated at direct risk of catching the virus. You need to be vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, then you're not doing yourself any service. You're not doing your friends and your coworkers any service. They can catch it from you. So you need to be vaccinated if you're going to go to work in this industry, just like we got to be vaccinated to be back on campus here in the fall. I think that's only right. I think it's only fair. We have rights to be able to go and do our jobs to the best of our ability. So when people are not vaccinating, they don't realize that, their rights are infringing upon my rights and your rights. Right. So how do we solve this? We solve this by calling it a public health issue. This is for the good of the public health. This is not a right wing, a left wing, a Republican, a Democrat, a black or white issue. This is a public health issue. And we need to do it in the interest of everybody staying as healthy as they possibly can. That's why the vaccination should take place, when you go back to work, and especially when you're traveling on the road with the team.
100%, totally agree. Now, looking ahead now with the Patriots, training camp obviously has been underway. I'm going to start with, I would say, the elephant in the room, although to me it's pretty obvious. I don't know what you think with the quarterback competition. I'll just give you my take first. I feel like Cam Newton's obviously probably going to be the starter. We've seen Belichick has always been endorsing him ever since he really came to New England, and he's the veteran in the room. Granted, yes, he had COVID last year. I mean, his play wasn't good, but I know Mac Jones has been having good performances from training camp, but can you see anywhere else, any other way?
No, I've always been, I understand where, Coach Belichick is saying. I've always felt the job was Cam's, and Cam's to lose. Mac Jones would have to, throw the equivalent of a knockout punch in training camp for him, to gain the job over Cam Newton. So, and that's no sweat off of, Mac. Look, and if he does that, more power to him. The Patriots will be a better football team. But I don't see it happening because he's just learning. I think they want to bring him along, a little bit more slowly. And I think that's what you want to do with someone you're investing time and money and a high draft pick with. I don't think you want to throw him right in the fire on this thing, regardless of how, people feel, they should do that, or how much they feel, Cam Newton, stunk last year. And look, the guy was coming off an injury and coming off of COVID himself. I think we need to give him this final chance to see if he can make amends and lead the team. And if he can, then hopefully you get, closer to the Cam that was an NFL MVP a few years ago. And then whether it happens or not, Mac can learn under him for at least a year, carry the clipboard, spell him a little bit here and there, and then give him the ball and let him roll with it next year. I don't really see anything wrong with that scenario.
Now, here's my follow-up, though, because if for some reason stuff does go south, and because my concern, I agree with you, I think he's going to be named the starter. My only concern with Cam is really, I feel like since he went to the Super Bowl in Carolina, he's always very injury prone, and his passes from the pocket is not really great. But so my question is, if it gets to that point again, how long do you think Belichick would wait until he goes to Jones in the season?
Oh, I would think that I think Cam gets the first month, but if they go through the first month, 1-3, then I think you might see, the groundswell, come up to the point where, Bill really can't afford to do anything else other than try to make the move early. My personal thought is it would probably go longer than that. Probably give them the whole first half of the season before they make the change. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, I could certainly see it being well into October and maybe even into November before you would see a switch at quarterback.
Okay, because I remember last year he was definitely. There was games. I guess it was later in the season, granted, but he was not afraid to just bench him. It was later in the season for sure, but it was definitely
right. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Now going ahead, I want to focus on this because with N'Keal Harry, earlier before training camp started, his agent said that he wants out. And now from everything reading that's going up in Foxborough, he's been one of the bright points in the wide receiving crew so far. So my question is there a chance, if it was me, I would think that the Patriots are just going to try to use this as a showing in the preseason to get more value on the trade market. Do you see it that way, or do you see the Patriots or N'Keal Harry having a change of mind?
Well, I don't think there's really anything wrong with N'Keal doing what he did. It sounds a little juvenile, but I think he's just trying to make some space for himself. I think the biggest issue was that he was trying to look for a way out before he had ever worked himself out. And I think that's probably what some of what, his and Coach Belichick's talks were about. Hey, N'Keal, let's not worry about, where you're going to be before we ever get there. Just go out and work hard and try to utilize your talent to the best of your ability, and then we'll let the chips fall where they may. And I frankly think he's doing that so far in camp. I think he's had a really good camp thus far. I'll be anxious to see whether or not the quarterbacks throw to him or whether or not he's able to hold on to the ball, because his biggest issue is just being able to hold on to the ball. I want to see if he's got some receiver hands. That's what I want to see. Or does he have two before his for hands? That's what I want to know.
Right. So I'm obviously reading from what's been going on from the beat reporters out there in practice. I'm curious, there's two guys that stuck out from when I was looking at what was going on who are, I guess, are considered under the radar. And I just want to see what your opinion is if you think they have a chance of ultimately making or having a role with this team. So the one that I saw was cornerback Michael Jackson Sr., who is having a chance to possibly get a slot right behind Stephen Gilmore. Or the other one was also a wide receiver, Kristen Wilkerson, who used to be on the practice squad, but has also been showing some sparks in training camp. I was just wondering, or anyone else that you have noticed that could be under the radar?
I think both of those guys are in position to be really good depth pieces. I think Wilkerson may be less likely, only because it certainly might come down to between him and Harry for that last receiver slot. Jackson, again, they're very deep at corner. And if Steph Gilmore is back, as everybody expects him to be back once the season goes, then it might be a situation where they might want to try to, see if they can sneak him through in a practice squad situation. But right now, because they're deep at that position, I'm not sure I see either one making the active roster.
Is there anyone else that, besides those two, that you think are also under the radar of not being looked at as closely?
Well, the guy that I think there are two. Harry is the one that I think everybody looked at thinking is, well, he probably won't make the team anyway. And he's had such a good summer camp that I think now that you have to consider him as a legitimate, pick to make the team. The other one is the young kicker, Quinn Norden, because Falk has been banged up a little bit during camp, and so Norton's getting every opportunity to kick. And, I would imagine that will probably continue. I'd be surprised if we didn't see him kick some in the exhibition season. So I think, Norton really is the only undrafted free agent on the team. That's how, thoroughly, the Patriots brought in, free agents in the offseason. But I would tell you right now, he may be 50-50 to make this team. So I think that would shock people because he's got a very strong leg, and he showed that in the camps that I've been out to.
Very interesting. Especially be interesting to see once they get to preseason against live action as well.
Yeah, right.
So now something else is, obviously the Patriots have made a lot of additions at the receiving and tight end position as well. I mean, Nelson Aguilar for one, and then Hunter Henry, who actually is now according to Mike Reese and throughout the outlets in Boston, is going to be out a couple weeks into the preseason, it looks like, but should be back for week 1 versus Miami. And then Jonnu Smith. I have, I guess, a two-part question. First is, with all these, they obviously upgraded at these positions, but in your view, do you see any of these guys, because to me, I don't, but do you see any of them being a true number 1 option?
No, probably not. I mean, you never say never, but right away, no, I'm not sure that I see that. So, I mean, again, time's going to tell. I would say right now, no, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't develop and get an opportunity, especially if someone goes down in front.
And then my second part is the tight end upgrade that they did with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. This, from what I've been reading, correct me if I'm wrong, is the first time they did a 2 tight end offense since Hernandez and Gronk.
Well, they've run it. They just haven't had, potentially, I think, they haven't had the talent at the slot at the position that they feel like they have now with those 2 guys.
So then my question is, with these now talent, as you were mentioning, how do you see this offense, I guess, with these 2 guys panning out? Because
I think, it stands to reason that the strength of this team is going to be through that offensive line, and they're going to try to ground and pound it and keep the ball out of an opposing team's hands and let their defense do a lot of the work. I could see the Patriots trying to get involved in a lot of 17-13 games, and I think that's probably what they're sort of aiming for. So But I do think that they'll try to, control the ball and run the clock, and they won't be a quick strike, probably air it out type of team that we've seen them be in the past. I think it'll be a little bit of a different mindset, but I think they'll have one of the better offensive lines in the entire NFL, and they're going to try to run behind that. And those two tight ends are a big part of that.
And all their defensive guys are coming back off the COVID from last year.
Yeah,
as well.
right.
Now, looking ahead to this season, then, what are your expectations for this team? And I guess if you're looking at comparing up against the rest of the division, because to me, I think Buffalo is going to be the number one. But from there, I feel like it's between Miami and New England for 2 and 3, because I don't see the Jets.
It is. I think you're right. I think the Patriots should be in the mix for a playoff spot. I think they're going to have to win at least 10 games, probably 11 to get there. So, and I think the way that the schedule is built, that I think they'll have an opportunity to do that. The one thing that does concern me the most, Reed, is the fact that they don't have their bye week until after, 11 weeks, which is the latest bye in the entire NFL this year. And if they can get through to that point where they get a week off to rest bodies relatively unscathed, then I think this is definitely a playoff team. I think before that, it's going to be a war of attrition. So, did they do a good enough job of building depth on this team, because they are going to have injuries? That's the biggest issue right now.
So you see it as like a wild card option until
yeah, I do. I mean, the division belongs to Buffalo until Buffalo gives it up,
right,
or the Patriots take it from them. I don't know if the Patriots are as good, in the top 22 as the Bills are, because the Bills, I think, return something like 20 of their 22 starters, which is amazing. So, I think you definitely have to give Buffalo the benefit of the doubt, at least initially. But I definitely can see the Patriots as getting in as a wild card. If they can get to 11 wins, they'll be the wild card. They should be.
Could you see them making noise come playoff time, or just?
Sure, they can. Well, when you're in the playoffs, it's one and done, brother. So, anybody can beat anybody in a one and done situation. I would like the Patriots' chances to do some damage, to win a game or two. Absolutely.
How would you match them up against Kansas City?
I wouldn't right now.
Right.
I wouldn't. I think that would be unfair to. Right. So, but we need to see how the season develops. Right. Who's left standing, who's got healthy bodies, what young players have developed into, prime roles, that kind of thing. Because really, as we all know, the playoffs are all about, continuing the war of attrition. Which team survives the regular season with the most toys left at the end?
Absolutely. And then I just want to end it on this one. Obviously, this year, it's going to be the first time Tom Brady returns to New England. Obviously, it's still way out into the distance, but I'm just curious. Obviously, there was a talking point. One of the undrafted, players of the Patriots had a different view where it was, we're not having any ceremonies. It's just, we're here to beat you. But my question to you is, for being there for much longer, what are you expecting the atmosphere to be there on a Sunday night in prime time for when he returns?
Oh, I think it'll be a blast. It'll be a lot of fun. The crowd will be, whipped into a frenzy. I fully expect half the crowd to cheer him, just like they would if he were the Patriots quarterback still. So I think that'll be a real sort of a surreal night for everybody. But, like some of the Patriot players have said, look, hey, it's great that he's coming back, but we're here to beat him. And I definitely think they'll feel like, hey, it's great that you're back, brother, but, you're on our turf. We're going to try to, beat your rear end. And I think you'll definitely see the Patriots with a concerted effort to that end.
It'll be definitely very interesting. One of the best primetime games in the NFL this season.
I would agree with that. I think the ratings will be through the roof for that. So be a lot of fun to be a part of.
Absolutely. Are you going to be there first game preseason versus Washington Thursday?
I will be there. Yep.
All right. But that is all the time we have for you today. For John Rooke, I'm Reed Becker, and we'll see you next time on Views from the Booth.